Hi everybody, Levi Clay here, and in today's video I'm finally going to start talking you through how we should go about developing our understanding and application of rhythm in our study of music from both an oral and intellectual or even visual standpoint. This is going to really help take your music understanding and ability to perform to the next level. But let's just briefly talk about why that would be the case. Now, of course, I think that a lot of the aspects of music that we tend to work on tend to be focused on pitch, and that makes sense because when you hear a rhythm, it's very easy to intuit that rhythm, very easy to hear a rhythm and repeat it back. Whereas when it comes to pitch, there tends to be a lot more focus on, well, I understand the pitch that I need to play, but I need to find where I play that on my instrument, be it on the guitar or on the piano, however you're playing your instrument. A lot of effort goes into the pitch side of things, but rhythm is incredibly important. When you think about the evolution of popular music throughout the last, let's say, 1,000 years, we've seen a huge development in both pitch and also in rhythm. And the rhythm side of things is incredibly interesting when you think about it. If you think back to Gregorian chant music, rhythmically it's incredibly simple music. And it doesn't need to be complicated because they were starting to experiment with harmony in that music, and in the most limited way possible. But as you start moving through different eras of music, Renaissance music, Baroque music into the classical era, you start to become a little bit more rhythmically complicated, but only in a minor sense. Now, of course, at the time there will have been this sense that a lot of boundaries are being pushed here. When you look at some of Bach's two-part inventions, there's some lovely interplay between eighth, 16th notes and quarter notes between left and right hands, and yeah, it's cool and would definitely be considered relatively intricate music for the time. And you start looking at fugues and things, rhythmically they're trying to push some boundaries. But when you keep pushing forward, you move on into the 20th and 21st centuries, and you start with the proliferation of swing music and of course rock and roll rhythms. Then we start to get a lot more progressive jazz rhythms start to come into the equation. If you think of the sounds that were happening in music in the 70s with funk music, we now live in a post-funk world, and because of that it's important that we understand the foundations on which those funk rhythms are built, because you couldn't have modern music like, say, Bruno Mars without having James Brown. You need to understand those rhythms in order to really and fully be able to expand upon and develop the ideas found in those styles of music. And of course, we're now in 2022, and there's a whole new kind of rhythmic renaissance happening, if you like, with the popularization of polyrhythmic ideas from bands like Chon, or kind of the quintuple swing thing that you're hearing from lots of these kind of neo-gospel sounding bands, which is definitely an interesting sound that, without fully understanding from an intellectual perspective how we can go about understanding and really integrating these sounds into our playing and our practice and our study, you can be left relatively lacking. Now, when I talk about the intellectual side of rhythm, what we're really going for here is the ability to communicate with other musicians, but also with yourself. So if you hear somebody play a rhythm, ba 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 da, ba bu da 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 da. Now, when I clicked that, I know I could repeat that, right? Ba, 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 da, ba, bu, da, 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 da. Relatively sure that was what I did there. And when I do that, I have not just an understanding of what's being played, but I have an understanding of where that thing is being played in relation to the beat. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the pulse, the beat, what it means to have a beat, and we're going to talk about basic quarter note, eighth note rhythms, rests, being able to conceptualize them, visualize them, read them, and understand them. And in the next follow-up video to this, I'm going to show you how I want you to go about actually practicing those to really internalize these things from a kind of language-based perspective. So let's begin by talking about the beat. Now, I mentioned this in my last video, but I think that the concept of a beat is something that is a uniquely human experience. When you really think about the concept of a beat, what is a beat? When we listen to music, why is it that we tap our foot to it? You know, the concept of a beat is not something that truly exists in sound. It's something that is perceived in sound. And the reason I describe it as uniquely human is because it requires the understanding of the passage of time and our ability to measure that passage of time. And I don't think that that's necessarily something that, say, a dog can fully realize. Really think about the passage of time and the sounds that I heard in relation to that passage of time. Now, a beat is what we essentially use to measure out that passage of time to give us a structure in which, or reference points in which we can label where sounds happened. So that concept of a beat is incredibly important to get your head around. And one of the things that I often see is very lacking in my students when they're working on music, rhythmic ideas, songs, or whatever. You often hear teachers talking about tapping your foot. Now, I'm not necessarily encouraging my students to always tap their foot. I'm not saying that that's truly essential, but that feeling of tapping your foot or your hand or whatever it happens to be, I can tap my foot and clap my hand against my body like this while I'm talking to you, and I could consider this a pulse. I mean, in theory, you could notate everything that I'm saying to you right now in relation to this pulse, assuming that pulse is relatively steady. Or if it's not, you can still notate in relation to a pulse. But this idea of feeling a pulse in music is incredibly important, and everything that you're going to study rhythmically from beyond this point will require a solid understanding of pulse. But not just an understanding, an experience of pulse. So I'm probably, this is probably, I'm treating you like your children here. But it's incredibly important that you can put on music and tap your foot to it. It's incredibly important that you can put on a piece of music and recognize where a pulse falls in that music, because that's what we're hearing everything in relation to. So that's our first point. Now, as I start looking at these exercises that I want to start talking about, these all came from one of my weekly guided ear training sessions, which you can check out, link in the description, over on Patreon if you want to help develop your ear. We've been doing a lot on the eyes in those lessons over the last few weeks. These are some really good exercises to help you understand these quarter note and eighth note rhythms. So what I've got for you here on screen is a very simple, incredibly simple visual representation of, using traditional music notation, of course, a visual representation of that beat, that pulse. What we can see here is I've got 4 individual bars of music separated by the lines, and in each one of those bars we can see 4 individual notes. Now, we're not even going to talk about the pitch, it doesn't matter, but we can very clearly see in this example that there are 4 individual notes in each one of these bars, and we can see visually that those notes, in terms of their value, they all look the same, they look identical, so they must all be the same value. And just using simple maths, if we can say we have a whole bar of music there and each one of these notes takes up 1/4 of that bar, it would make sense to call these quarter notes. Now, this is, of course, a bar of 4/4. It's common time. It's the most common measure of beats that you're going to hear in music. But, of course, as you develop further, you're going to see more advanced time signatures, or odd time signatures, as they're often referred to. Now, when you see this on screen, it's incredibly important that when we look at this, we have an intellectual understanding of it. So I've notated underneath these notes with numbers how we'd go about counting that. So a pulse on its own means nothing unless we know where the first beat of each measure is going to fall. So I want you, when looking at this, to click your fingers, and I want you to vocalize along with it. Now, of course, the first bar, I've got the numbers written there for you, but as you progress, those numbers disappear. But we still want to be building up that association between the numbers that we're supposed to hear and that pulse. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you're doing that, you want to be following the notes. 3, 4. Always looking at the notes. 2, 3, 4. Now, of course, you could play this on a pitched instrument. You could play this on a guitar. You could play it on a snare drum. It really doesn't matter. Understanding of that rhythm is at the fundamental. Now, the next example on screen includes rests, because of course music is not just about the notes you play, it's about the notes that you don't play, it's about the spaces in between the notes. So what we have here in that first measure, these are rests. There's no pitch associated with these because we're actually not playing. And I've got 4 individual rests for you. Now in the long run you will learn what it looks like to have a rest that looks like all 4 of those, but with one symbol. But in this case, I want you to be able to see what a quarter note rest looks like. That's really important because as you move on into those next bars, you can start to see, well, for example, in that second bar, we have 3 notes followed by 1 rest. Now, when it comes to vocalizing these, I'm still clicking my fingers. It's really up to you, okay? We could say the notes 1, 2, 3, 4, but I think it's probably more important that we're ghosting those. So when I move into that second bar, we would have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or if I maybe put a pitch on there, da, 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 da. Now, I think these are very, very simple rhythms, right? Yeah, I'm sure you can read that next bar, right? 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 4. Next bar. 1, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. The next bar. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. I think these are very simple rhythms, these quarter note rhythms, because everything that we're counting falls on that beat. It all falls where I click my fingers, which is, it's important that we do look at those sorts of rhythms. But I want to move on to something a little bit more interesting. So in the next example, here we have what I'm going to call eighth notes. And why are we calling them eighth notes, I hear you say? Because look at that first bar. How many notes are in that bar? There's 8 individual notes in that bar. They might be beamed together. That just makes them easier to read at a glance. I assure you that's going to help in the long run when you start looking at reading in a more serious way. But looking at this, we should be able to count them. There's 8 notes there, up here somewhere. 8 individual notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, we don't want to count them like that. We don't want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We still want to have that reference to our beat. Our beat is incredibly important. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want that suddenly to turn into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. That's no good to us. So the way we're going to count these is with 1 for our downbeats, 1. And then and for our upbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That's how we're going to read those eighth notes. So looking at those next bars after this, we should be able to look at this and say, okay, this is the intellectualization of rhythm. We should be able to look at this and say, okay, we've got 2 eighth notes here, then there's a quarter note rest, another quarter note rest, and another quarter note rest. Now I've put the counts underneath these for you just to help you in these early stages. That's going to sound like this. 1 and 1 and, 1 and, ba-da, ba-da. Simple rhythm. Same again in the next bar. We should be able to see we've got a rest on beat 1, 2 and, rest on beat 3, rest on beat 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 and, 2 and, 2 and. Next bar. I'll give you counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 and, 3 and. Final bar. 4 and, 4 and. So I think those are very simple in concept, but it becomes a little bit more interesting when we start combining these rhythms, these quarter note rhythms and these eighth note rhythms. Boom. So let's look at this entire line and let's intellectualize it before we try and play it, before we try and count it, before we try and understand what's going on here. So looking at our first bar, I can see there's a quarter note and then there's another quarter note. So we can deduce information from this. We can say that the first note must start on beat 1. And that first note that we're seeing, it lasts for a whole beat. So the next note must begin on beat number 2. Okay, let's look at that next note. We've got a collection of eighth notes here. We know that this must start on beat 3. It must do because we have beat 1 counted for. We have beat 2 accounted for. So looking at this, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and 4 and. That's our rhythm. Ba, 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 ba. It's a very visual form of notation, what we have here. Just in general, I think notation is considerably more visually useful than I think it can often appear. It can feel a lot like hieroglyphics before you start really learning to understand music, but at its core, simple concepts here. So looking at that second bar, we've got a quarter note, 2 eighth notes, a quarter note and a quarter note. We should be able to look at that and point to beat 1. Where's beat 1? Well, we can see it's that first quarter note. Where's beat 3? Well, it must be that, I want to say the next quarter note. That does make sense. It is the next quarter note because we have 2 eighth notes. Can we see where beat 3 is? Beat 4. Beat 2, that's our 2 eighth notes. You can also see when you look at that bar that things are, I've broken the bar up. You can see it quite clearly where each individual beat is. You could highlight each individual beat in there. We can see beat 1. We can see beat 2. So counting this, 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. Simple rhythm. Let's look at that next bar. 2 eighth notes, quarter note, 2 eighth notes. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4 and. Let's move on to the final bar here. We've got 4 eighth notes, quarter note, 2 eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and. Now these intellectualizations, these vocalizations of rhythms are very, very, very useful for us in the long run, because when we start playing more complicated music that features more complicated rhythms, being able to say to yourself, okay, yeah, so this part that I'm going to play, this chord that I'm going to hit, this bend that I need to play, this comes in on the and of beat 3. Now think about what that means, the and of beat 3. Not beat 1, 1. Not beat 2, 2. Not beat 3, 3. But the and of beat 3, 3 and. So if I were to count that, 1, 2, 3 and. 1, 2, 3 and. Or da, ba. I understand from a very deliberate perspective where the and of beat 3 is. Okay, let's move on. So next up we have some eighth note rests. Boom. So when we look at these, you should be able to identify on beat 2 and beat 4, we have that quarter note rest that we've already looked at. Well, in between those, I've put in 2 consecutive eighth note rests, just so we know what an eighth note rest looks like on its own. Let's move on from that bar and look at the second bar. Now in that second bar, what you can see there is 4 eighth notes, 1 and 2 and. We then have a rest on beat 3. We play the and of beat 3, and then we've got 2 eighth notes on the 4 and the and of beat 4. 1 and 2 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 4 and. Da 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 da. Simple rhythm. Now I've made it easy for you by putting those counts underneath. You can see anytime there's a note that we're not saying, we're not going to vocalize, I put it in brackets. It's there, it exists. The time still happens. And I think this is one of the most, under appreciated aspects of playing and understanding and appreciating rhythm. And that's rhythm is always in relation to a pulse, and that pulse never stops. The pulse is always there. So as a student, it benefits you to make sure that you don't hesitate, you don't stop. Music keeps moving forward all the time. So if you mess up a rhythm, that's fine. Don't lose your pulse. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't hesitate. Don't start over. Just keep up with your pulse. If you make a mistake, that's totally fine, because the pulse is the important thing. The pulse is the thing that makes people want to move. The pulse is the thing that makes people want to dance. The pulse is the thing that your audience can latch onto. And I think that I see it time and time again with students where they play something, they make a mistake, they go, oh, let me try that again. And you're training in this idea that time is flexible. Now, time is flexible to a degree, but time can't rewind. We can't turn back the clock. We can only improve moving forward. So if you make little mistakes, that's fine. Just keep the pulse going, keep the pulse, keep the time there, and bring the exercise back. Start again and make sure that you're playing everything that you play in time. We're trying to train our brains when we play music to process and recreate sounds in real time, and that time is so important. So looking at the third bar here, we have a rest on beat 1, play on the and of beat 1, 2 and then we have our 3 and our 4 and. So and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Da 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 da. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Let's intellectualize the final bar here. Playing beat 1, the 1 and the and. We then have a rest on beat 2. We're playing the and of beat 2. We have a rest on beat 3. We're playing the and of beat 3. We're playing 4, and we're playing the and of 4. So we have 1 and 4 and. Ba 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 ba. These rhythms are getting a little bit more interesting right now. You don't tend to hear these sorts of rhythms in Baroque music. Da da ba 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 da da ba 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 da ba. Jazzier rhythms. Jazzier, even jazzier, I should say, when you swing. Da 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 ba da 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 ba ba da da da. More on that in the future. So here's an example, here's a line for you that I want you to intellectualize that is going to use these eighth note rests in combination of the quarter notes that you've looked at and the eighth notes that you've looked at. So looking at that first bar, playing beat 1, playing beat 2. We have a rest on beat 3, but we're playing the and of beat 3. Then in the final beat, beat 4, we're playing 4 and. 1, 2, and 4 and. 1, 2, and 4 and. Ba, 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 ba. Next bar, quarter note. Rest on beat 2, but we're playing the and of beat 2. We're playing beat 3, we're playing beat 4. 1 and 3, 4. 1, and 3, 4. Ba, 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 ba. Always have the pulse there. Doing these without that, if I went ba, 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 it doesn't mean anything. Without that pulse, it means nothing. So pulse is incredibly important. Next bar, we have the one and the and of beat 1. We're playing beat 2. We're playing beat 3. We have a rest on beat 4, but we're playing the and of beat 4. 1 and 2, 3, and 1 and 2, 3, and 1 and 2, 3, and 1. Cool rhythm. Final bar for you. Playing 1 and of beat 1. Missing beat 2, but playing the and of beat 2. Playing beat 3, playing 4 and in beat 4. 1 and 3, 4 and 1 and 3, 4 and da 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 ba 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 ba. Cool rhythms. Now, I want to make things just a little bit trickier to end. One more line of music for you. Looks like this. So when we look at this one's, I think for a lot of people, it's going to be considered considerably more confusing. And the reason it's more confusing is because we have a lot more rests here. This is a lot more about playing the spaces, right? When I look at these, I want to be able to vocalize where I have to play these notes. You hear this all the time in horn sections, who are really there to accentuate the music. So they put punches in, punch these chords collectively that really, create some interest in the music. These rhythms shouldn't be considered hard to read if we put in the time and really learn to understand what they are. So let's look at that first one. Now, this is just a combination of rhythms we've already looked at, right? Nothing new here. We're in beat 1. We have an 8th note rest and an 8th note. So we're not playing beat 1, but we're playing the and of beat 1. Beat 2 is a rest. Beat 3, we have a rest followed by an 8th note. So we're not playing beat 3, we're playing the and of beat 3. And then beat 4. So if I click my fingers, give myself a pulse. Again, playing the and of 1 and playing the and of 3. So and, ba, ba. It's my 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba, 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 ba. And the one thing I've kind of not pointed out is the pulse is flexible in terms of how fast or slow the pulse is. So if I were going ba, 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 ba. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Hard to vocalize that sort of stuff at that speed. Or slow. 3, 4, ba, ba. I know where these notes fall, so I can be very accurate about it. Okay, let's look at the second measure there. So here we have a quarter note rest, nothing played in beat 1. Beat 2, we have a rest, an 8th note rest, followed by an 8th note. So we're not playing beat 2, but we're playing the and of beat 2. Beat 3 is a rest. Beat 4, not playing beat 4, but we're playing the and of beat 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba, 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 ba. Simple rhythms. Next bar, we're playing beat 1, we've got a quarter note there. Beat 2, we've got a rest followed by an 8th note. So we're not playing 2, playing the and of 2. Beat 3, we're not playing 3, we're playing the and of 3. And beat 4, we're playing the 4 and the and. So we'd have 3, 4. Ba, 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 ba. 1 and 4 and 1 and 4 and. Whew. Getting there. Only 2 more bars to go. More space in this next one. So we're playing beat 1. We're not playing anything on beat 2. Beat 3. We're not playing beat 3. We've got that 8th note rest. But we are playing the and of beat 3. We've got an 8th note on the and. Beat 4 we can see on its own, just that quarter note rest. So we're playing beat 1 and we're playing the and of beat 3. 1 and 1 and. Now the tricky thing about this as an idea is I don't want you to read a rhythm like this and just learn what it sounds like and then close your eyes and just repeat that sound, okay? I want you to really look at the thing that you're working on. I'm pointing down here because I'm reading them and I'll be adding them here in post. So I should really do here. I want you to read them. I want you to pay attention to them because we're trying to really understand when we're playing these rhythms, what these things that we're looking at sound like. We're trying to build up that association between the thing that we see, our ability to understand the thing that we see, and then relate it to a sound. because in the long run, you want to be able to see these rhythms and not have to count through them, not have to intellectualize them. I can just put these rhythms in front of me and just read them. It's not a problem for me because I've learned these rhythms. And you can totally get that with these. So the final example, this one's a scarier one because you're maybe looking at that first beat and you're like, oh, what's that? I'm unfamiliar with that. So let's ignore it. Let's go to the end of the bar. Let's just go right to the end of the bar. We've got a quarter note rest at the end of the bar. That must be beat 4. We know that must be beat 4. Before that, we've got this rhythm we've read many times before. An 8th note rest followed by an 8th note. Well, that collectively must be beat 3. So that must be the 3, and it must be the and of beat 3. And then we jump back and we go, okay, well, there's this symbol here, and I don't necessarily know what this means. Well, if we know what the second half of the bar is, that first part must represent that first half of the bar. This must be 2 beats of rest. It must be. Now, when it comes to counting these sorts of things, I don't want you literally counting them. I want you to see that and go, okay, I know that the 8th note that I have to play here comes in on the and of beat 3. That should be enough for you. Doesn't matter the speed of the music. 1, 2, 3, and. 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 So look at that rhythm. Here's my count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba. 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 We can be very sparse with these rhythms. Now, of course, there's lots more rhythms like this over on my Patreon page where we talk about this. And as part of my weekly guided practice routines, we've been doing the same basic principle, but for 16th note rhythms, which is probably, well, not probably more useful. If you were in a post-funk world and funk has influenced the music you play, then 16th notes are going to be very important. But I think starting with 8th notes is incredibly important, that you really get to grips with that, because 16th notes is just this, but twice as many notes per beat, right? So on the note of that, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names scrolling on screen there. They look a little bit off-center. What's going on there? How very strange. But as always, thank you all very much for your support. I couldn't do what I do without your love, kindness, and generosity. So if you want to get access to my weekly guided practice routines, my weekly guided ear training sessions, or my transcription challenges, download hundreds of transcriptions, and be an active member in my communities, where you can get all the help that you could need from me and these awesome people, then check out the link in the description. If that doesn't suit, you can also head on over to Amazon and check out one of my many books. I have lots of them available. I am sure that you will find something that you enjoy. Thank you so much for checking out this video, guys. Hopefully you've got something out of it. If you have, let me know in that comment section below. If you have any questions, I'm here to help. Much love, and I will see you for another video soon. Goodbye.